Take 342. This is what I feel like. I feel like I have to have a clapboard right now. It's like, okay, take 482, Wendy. And action. Hey everyone, welcome. This is the Wendy Cooper Show, conversations with remarkable people over 50. But you know what? Today I have a remarkable person who is under 50. Her name is Amy Cohen Epstein. I have to keep throwing that in there. Amy Cohen Epstein. And she is the founder, along with her sisters, of the Lynn Cohen Foundation. Now, this is a place that someone would go if they felt as though they maybe were at high risk for breast or ovarian cancer. It might even be someplace that you go as a woman to find out if you are. And Amy will explain that and talk all about that. Now, why are we talking about that today? I know it's COVID and everybody's indoors. It's the last thing, Wendy, we need to talk about is breast and ovarian cancer. Actually, I think it's the first thing we need to talk about. So here's the deal. I wanted to have Amy on the show because I think it gave me a license to open up my floodgates to my audience and let you know that I was gone for quite a while from my podcast because I was battling the mental fatigue and then the physical fatigue of fighting a reoccurrence of ovarian cancer after 15 years. And that took up most of my 2019. Now, it was very difficult on many different levels, but I don't want to get into all of the different levels from thinking about dealing it with age and all of the vanity things and stuff like that. So I think I chime in this conversation about some of that. But Amy's foundation was founded because they really want to try to prevent people from getting cancer, or they want to help people live their best life possible. Now, it's a big ticket to say we want to help prevent cancer. Now, that's a very big ticket. So let's just say they want to give you the education, the knowledge, and the tools to help you live the best life you can, even if you are at a high risk for ovarian and breast cancer. I think you're going to enjoy what we talk about, although I wish we had talked about much more, but Amy only had a certain amount of time, and I think she had to go homeschool her kids. Sorry. But anyway, I do hope you enjoy the show. If you have any questions or anything like that, then those are for you to shoot over to Amy, and I'm sure you can do that if you go to the Lynn Cohen Foundation.org. But here you go. We're going to jump right into the show. Thanks for listening and share the love.
Our focus is on preventive care. And so our focus is actually first on healthy women. And so when you talk about preventive care, you're actually going like almost what I would call back to the very beginning. So you're talking about women who, before they get sick, and you're talking about prevention. And so for us, in order to then lead in all the way to the end game, which is research, we're actually focused on a high risk group of women. So before you knew you had BRCA, you were in that group. So you were a high risk group. You were a part of that high risk group. So we were talking about you from the very beginning. And that's what my foundation is focused on. So we would have wanted to find you and to bring you into our high risk preventive care clinic to determine what your actual risk is or was, and then figure out a way to keep you healthy before you had the crazy symptoms that you had, so you wouldn't have to deal with your situation at the height of it.
Explain what that means. How do you define high risk?
So high risk would be, for example, someone like myself, someone who has a history of cancer in their family, someone who knows that they are BRCA1 or BRCA2 positive. A woman knows they're BRCA1, BRCA2 positive. For those who don't know what that means, it means you carry a genetic mutation, which puts you at significantly increased risk for breast or ovarian cancer. Someone who has had cancer. So if you've had breast cancer or ovarian cancer, that puts you at high risk for the other. women of Ashkenazi Jewish descent puts us at, I'm one of those women, puts us at increased risk for breast or ovarian cancer. And those are the main groups of women that are in that high risk category. And basically, a lot of it is family history. Now, you also have to remember that most cancers are totally random. And so,
right, exactly. I know that.
You know that. Most people don't. But so that's the hard part. But if you can get to the patients and the women or potential patients or women that are in that high risk category and see them before they're, God forbid, hit with cancer, then we can give them the tools, or as many tools as we can, to stay healthy, and then also follow them once they're in our clinics to help figure out better ways to lead us to things like an early detection test for ovarian cancer, which, as you know, does not exist.
What would you say to somebody like me that comes to you? How do you determine I'm 50 years old and I don't really know that cancer is growing in my body? I don't know for sure that I'm BRCA, right? So why am I at high risk?
One, just being of Ashkenazi Jewish descent, having that blood in your vein. I recommend going and seeing a doctor and talking about your potential high risk.
How would my gynecologist know that I had Ashkenazi Jewish blood?
So a really good gynecologist at some point when we're older would say, let's talk about, we're doing screening. We screen for cervical cancer. We check your ovaries for their size and shape. We screen for breast cancer with mammograms. Let's talk about, your history. Let's talk about your health history. Let's talk about your family history. And that would be one of the questions that they would potentially ask. Lots don't, but we do live in LA. And so I know you do, and that is not a random question to ask in Los Angeles. It would be pretty random to ask in other parts of this country, but we live in LA, so we'll stick with that. It wouldn't be that.
Amy, every single gynecologist should be asking that question to every single woman.
Yeah, 100%. And should be asking a question of, do you know what the health history is of your mother, your grandmother, your great-grandmother, all those things. And if they say, I have no idea, then I think we should take about 15 minutes to go find out. And by the way, the technology exists where you can find that out pretty easily now, or give it to one of your kids or grandkids as a side project to figure out that history if you can. And so just knowing that, I would say dig in. And then our clinics aren't the only ones that exist. There are clinics like this. There are people like this who can look at you as if you are special and you are in this category of higher risk as relative to the rest of the population. And so you would then sit with a genetic counselor. That is the first thing you would do, who would then sit with you and go through your family history and say, okay, let's talk about everybody you can think of. And so, for example, in my family, we couldn't think of anybody that had, besides my mom, but because my mom was diagnosed so early, she was 48 when she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, that was just this enormous red flag, right?
Right, exactly.
And so that changed everything. And my grandmother lived till she was 98 years old, similarly to your grandmother, and ended up dying pretty much of old age, of Alzheimer's and other sort of, her body just broke down.
Was your mom positive, BRCA positive, and are you BRCA positive?
No.
Okay, case in point. This is great. Because you do not need to be BRCA positive, everyone, to have this problem.
You do not. No. And the other thing is to note that because my mom was diagnosed so early, the gynecologic oncologist that runs my clinic, who I don't see regularly, but is a huge part of my life, obviously, because I work with her closely through the foundation, she says, we treat you as if you are BRCA positive. Why? Because there's other genetic mutations that we don't know about.
That's right.
And there's a lot of other genetic mutations we do know about, but we don't have a name that everybody knows, like BRCA. And so there's a lot of mutations that exist that just haven't been talked about as much. And there's a lot that exists that we don't know about.
over the course of the past 15, 20 years, they found the BRCA mutation, and then they went on to find other mutations.
Correct.
And they went on to find that if you have a BRCA mutation, depending on it's one or two, one is better in some respects than two, but neither one is any good.
Right.
So it started off as just ovarian and breast cancer. And then as research went on with the BRCA gene and the genetic mutation, and they started to find different variations, you're also at a high risk. So it's very important that anyone and everyone understands their genetic background.
100%. And also, two things that I believe come straight out of that. One is, we can forget about men in this conversation, specifically with women. We're not sort of the sum of our parts, right? We're a whole person, and our body works together as a whole. So you can't take your breasts and just take them as a separate being as our body. No, our breasts, and if you're at high risk for breast cancer, our breasts work with the rest of our body. It's all connected. And so that's something important to remember. And that's another reason why when we started our clinics, at first people said, well, just focus on the ovaries. And the doctors that we worked with said, well, that doesn't make any sense. A woman's body is a woman's body. And, we're not little parts that you can dissect and do in different parts of no woman wants to go see one doctor one day and talk about her ovaries and then 3 weeks later talk about her breasts. It doesn't work that way. And also research doesn't work that way. And in the last, I would say 5-ish years, they found that most ovarian cancers actually start in our fallopian tubes. And so it's not necessarily ovarian cancer. If we really want to be accurate, a lot of people would start calling it a fallopian tube cancer. So for example, when I turned 40, I had my fallopian tubes removed. Why? Because again, same gynecologic oncologist said the best preventive move that I could do would be to remove my fallopian tubes. It's very non-invasive. It's done through laparoscopy surgery. But just by doing that, I'm decreasing my chance of ovarian cancer significantly.
That's interesting because, so I automatically thought, Amy, for sure that your mom was BRCA, or maybe in my fantasy head, I was thinking, well, maybe they didn't know because maybe she passed away before they were really testing for BRCA. So maybe you don't know. And but I just assumed because of your passion for everything that you're doing with your foundation, that you were. And I'm happy that you're not, because that decreases your chances, but it doesn't, obviously. And and this needs to always be talked about. It because you don't have a genetic mutation, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you're not going, to possibly get cancer.
No, and I think that there's two ways of looking at life in general, and thus break that down even further, looking at your health and your past health and your future health. So to stick your head in the sand or become educated and become aware and be your own best advocate. And you can't do those things if you don't know what's going on. And so my mom was very scared to test for genetic mutation. We're talking, she was diagnosed in 1993 and she passed away in 1998. Mm-hmm. So it was early days of being tested for genetic mutations. And we were young, she had three daughters and we were very young, but she was tested and she tested negative, and I have a younger brother. And then we were all tested. My sisters and I were all tested as well, because I have a half sister who we all have the same mother, but she is a different father. And on her father's side, there's a lot more breast cancer. So we were all tested. And, people even then, 10, 15, 20 years ago said, why would you be tested? What are you going to do with that information? And my answer was, well, then I'm going to make informed decisions. And that's the best kind of decision you can make with anything in your life. So open eyes, clear eyes is how you make good decisions. And it's a really hard thing to do, but that's again, why you never do genetic testing without a genetic counselor. And the genetic counseling is a really, really important part of the equation, and who you meet with first.
You know what I'm going to say now, right? I'm going to say, yes, you can get all of that done through 23andMe. 23andMe?
Yeah.
Yeah, 23andMe actually does that testing. I was blown away because when I was tested for the BRCA gene, which was about 15 years ago, I had to go to the counselor and there was no way, but you have cancer, so we'll test you, but you really don't fall into the category. And then it came back that I was positive, right? For 185 deleterious. And, but it was really like, a pain in the butt to get tested. Now it seems as though you can just spit in a tube and be tested over the internet. And I believe that's true. I believe you can.
I think it's a little scary. I think
Yes.
there's a lot of information. I think a lot of it depends on your age, where you are in your life. I mean,
Yes.
I had an
Me too.
incredible encounter with two young women sisters I met when I had just moved to New York. It was about 1999. I was 20, maybe 3 or 4 years old. They were a little bit older, probably 27 and 30 years old. The older sister was married and had one child. The younger sister wasn't married, and their mom had just passed away. She had passed away, I believe, from breast cancer after having beaten ovarian cancer, or vice versa. To be honest with you, I can't remember. Both were horrible, and I think it was my memory blurred it because it was so bad. And one of the younger sister came to me, who was a friend of a friend of my older sisters. And I said to them, you need to go to our clinic in New York. You need to go and you need to sit with a genetic counselor. You need to see if genetic testing is right for you. And you need to have a full gynecologic, oncology visit. You need to have a breast oncology visit. You need to have like the full workup, and then you'll know what your baseline is and then be followed from there. And she looked at me like I had, like a third eye. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, first, I think you need to, if your mom wasn't tested, you need to see if you guys are BRCA positive. She had never heard that before.
I know so many people I know to this day have never heard of it.
Never heard. And this was 20 years ago. So fine. Yeah. But her mom had breast and ovarian cancer. And so they both did. They, when they ended up both being positive, they both had, when they went in and had, breasts removed and all sorts like surgeries, and they had found precancerous cells. They were really young. But, the younger sister hadn't had kids. She ended up having eggs frozen. And those aren't decisions that, as a pre-30-year-old woman, you can make without having, counseling and real, like, in-depth major. This isn't something you just decide on your own by spitting into a tube and getting it back over the internet. Like, this is significant. My point being, these are decisions that are really intense. And so
can I give you a really great example of what you're talking about? So I was at one of these meetings, right? Force or something like this years ago. And there was a plastic surgeon as the guest. And, these are people that have been, these are women, just to set it up for the audience listening. These are young women or women of all ages that have gathered in a home for this, BRCA meeting. And there's a cosmetic surgeon there, to talk about your options as far as breast surgery, as far as removing your breasts. No, regardless of whatever age you are, they're talking to a group, right? And I removed my breasts when I was 51 years old. It was, to me, I've never had breast cancer, right? But I removed my breasts when I was 51 years old. And it was the worst decision I think I ever made in my entire life. Why? And to this day, I'll say that. Why? My nipples were my erogenous zone. I had 12 surgeries after that. I had 6 infections. It wasn't until maybe 3 years ago that I really kind of got okay with my new gummy bear things that I have, but now those supposedly cause some type of weird cancer. But no one talks about, to your point, Amy, you need to talk to somebody that's qualified, because nobody talks about those things. Here was these cosmetic surgeons saying, oh yeah, you're going to look great. Oh, we're going to show you some boobs in the little private room afterwards. And it was like, yeah, some boobs looked great, but you had to have so much fat on your back or your belly in order to have real fatty tissue boobs and, all of these different options. And here's these young women who have suddenly discovered that they're BRCA positive, and having to make a choice to cut off your boobs. I mean, I stopped going because I was just appalled at that.
There are different options you can take. And I think having a double mastectomy and reconstructive surgery is a really big deal. People talk about it as if it happens every day, and it does happen a lot, but it's a big deal. And it's not one surgery, it's multiple surgeries. And reconstructive surgery, it doesn't happen in 2 hours and you're out and you're bouncing around, jogging around town the next day.
And it's one thing, Amy, if you have breast cancer.
It is.
If you have breast cancer.
Agreed. And to do it as a preventive measure is extreme. It's some doctors will recommend it in extreme cases, and it's a very big choice. It's not for everyone. Yeah. But it is a big deal. It's an extreme measure, and it's a big deal. You don't end up with these rock star boobs. Okay, everyone, you don't. No feeling. You got no feeling. It's very different than having, breast augmentation than having reconstructive surgery. So an example,
and the loss of sensation, the loss of feeling sexy. Yeah. I have to tell you, I had augmented breasts prior to my mastectomy with reconstruction. Yeah. And, I had sensation in my augmented breasts. I mean, my nipples worked, right? But I don't, they took my nipples, and I didn't even have breast cancer. Right. And they took my nipples. They don't do that anymore. I think they leave the nipples now. But, 14 years ago, that's what they did. And, they don't bounce. Besides the physical change and the saving of your life, you have to be ready for the emotional change, especially, in maybe your relationship with your husband or how he feels about your breasts. They might say, well, I don't really care. I love you. I just want you to be alive. And it's like, well, like 5-10 years down the road, remember when you had boobs?
But also, I think that it's also to remember that and everyone's situation is different. And so one is, what's your support system? And, women who go through this and who don't really understand the severity of the long and prolonged and multiple surgeries that happen, what does your support system look like? And not just what does your support system look like today, but what does it look like 2 years from now when this is all done? So that's really important and a huge part of the conversation that a lot of women don't have, and a lot of doctors and hospitals rush women into because they're looking at it from a very different point of view. And, that's significant. And those are conversations that really need to be had.
Yeah. And I didn't have that conversation with anyone. I was diagnosed, and then I went through my chemo, my surgeries for the ovarian cancer. I went through the chemo, and then they wanted to take my breasts, and they didn't, it was Kaiser, and they didn't talk to me about anything. They didn't offer me. Now they do. Now they do. This last cancer treatments that I went through, they gave me a social worker, I think because of my age, and Susan, and she was awesome. And she turned me on to places like your foundation and other places. And so there is a lot of information out there, especially now. There's a lot of help. The genetic thing is very, very, very important because catching things very early is really important. But I also, I would really love to talk to, I wish somebody had advised me, but they didn't. So moving on. I want to also talk to you about symptoms of ovarian cancer. The symptoms here, it's so interesting. Okay. Back pain, heartburn, belly bloat, menstrual changes, obviously. Well, not really obviously, I guess. Frequent or urgent urination, fatigue, nausea, or feeling full quickly, constipation, pelvic or abdominal pain, painful sex. Oh, you want to know something? All of those symptoms I had. Now, this last bout that I had, my recurrence. Okay, now I want everyone to know that I had every organ removed, right, 15 years ago. And so when it was very odd. The doctors thought it was very odd when I presented with an elevated CA-125 last December. And because it's been 15 years, we shouldn't be seeing recurrence, not your cancer type. We would have seen it within, the first 5 years maximum, but 3 years, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Then I started about a year before, which 2018, I started to be tired. I wouldn't feel nauseous, but I would get full really quickly. I was bloated. I had terrible constipation that I felt like I couldn't even push, like I was numb. I had all of these. I didn't have heartburn. That's one thing. I never get heartburn. Okay. Frequent urination. Yes. I had all of the signs, and, but yet I didn't know it. Right. I was like, oh, I've always been constipated. I just need to eat more fiber. Right. I'm just bloated because I don't really move around very much. I'm driving back and forth to Burbank every day. So, I just feel bloated. So anyway, one thing led to another, and I had the blood test. My CA-125 was elevated for the first time, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. It wasn't even elevated, by the way, when I had cancer the first time. It never was elevated. So this was a really red flag. But at the same time, my thyroid was at 0. So CA-125s can be elevated, not because of cancer. So then I had to wait to balance out my thyroid to make sure my CA-125 would either come down or keep going up, right? So the mental anguish that I was going through at 64 years old, being laid off of my job in Burbank in December, finding out that I have recurrence of ovarian cancer, options of a job somewhere at my age were like, what? That's not going to happen. Learning that ovarian cancer, when it recurs, it comes back as peritoneal cancer. So it invades the peritoneum, right? And it's rare, but it's serious, very serious cancer. So I'm learning all of this stuff, Amy, and I don't want to do chemo because I don't want to lose my hair again. My hair was like down to my waist, and it was like my youth, and I don't want to lose it. And the torture. I'm preparing myself to die. I'm doing advanced consents. I'm getting my stuff out of my safety deposit box. I'm learning about dying, right? What do I do to take care of my family when I die? This is how I was preparing myself. And I didn't have anyone to talk to about that. I was doing that all by myself because I didn't want to alert or make my family worry. I didn't want my sons to worry. I didn't want my husband to worry. That was really traumatic for me. Okay. So then I decided, so I worked with my surgeon to finally get me opened up after all these CAT scans because nobody could figure out where it was coming from. I said, open me up. Open up my belly. I want you in there. I want you looking around. And sure enough, they found it on the colon, on my bladder, on my peritoneum, and on my appendix was the outside had cancer on it, but it was inflamed and ready to burst. So they didn't know were my symptoms because of my appendix, and my appendix, because God loves me, was giving me these terrible side effects of back pain and really pressure and all of these things because it was getting ready to burst. And that led to finding the cancer, which now is gone. It's like a miracle, right? I did go through chemo. I decided to do that because my CA-125 went up to 3,800, and I said, okay, I'll do the chemo. And I did. And now I'm cancer-free.
One of the amazing things about being a part of the work that we do in the clinics that we are is that you're a part of it for the long haul. And so once you've beaten your first bout of cancer, you're not like, sayonara, see you later. I'm never going to see you people again. You're continually part of our clinic for as long as you want to be, and encouraged to be watched, forever, because it's unfortunate, but you're not like ever in the clear for the rest of your life, because that's what happens. That's one of the very early first things that we talked about is, what puts you at high risk for cancer? Well, having had cancer. That's just how our bodies are.
So if someone was to go to Lynn Cohen Foundation and they, they're coming there because they have a concern, right? Can you step step them through just a little bit of what they, of course, they'll go through the counseling, and the genetic counselor will ask them questions.
Yeah, you call, you get an appointment, you see the genetic counselor, and then the genetic counselor will talk to you. Then you'll have, if you're, then you keep moving forward. Then if it's wanted, needed, desired, you have genetic testing. You have, and this is all kind of one day, one time. You have an appointment with a gynecologist. So you have a full gynecology exam. Then you have a full breast exam. And then the doctors, the genetic counselor, the gynecologist, the breast oncologist sit around and talk about you and go over your your case, your history, and all that they've seen, and talk about, okay, what is the best thing that we can prescribe for this woman?
Now, how does one's insurance company, or how does one's doctors, or do people have to, would that person who came in for that evaluation, they go, oh, okay, I got it. This is what I want to do. What do they do then?
There's two options. One is we have 4 clinics, 2 in New York and 2 in Los Angeles. Our clinics, since we're in LA, I'll talk about LA. The clinics in LA are located at USC, at Norris Cancer Center. And then there's a component to our clinic at USC that also sees through USC in LA County, uninsured, underserved women. So insurance can work out either way, put it that way. As we know, insurance often doesn't cover everything. So we've worked hard to make sure that women are seen and women get the best care that they can. And then you go by the prescription as best as we can that the doctors prescribe for you. So whether that be checkups on a regular basis, whether that be working with your gynecologist that you normally see, whether that be making sure you have vaginal, most women have never had a vaginal ultrasound, whether that be your gynecologist doing vaginal ultrasounds on an annual or semi-annual basis. Well, if your gynecologist doesn't do that, then you do them at the clinic, and making sure that you're getting the testing that is good for you and right for you. And you can walk away with, advice that the right thing is an immediate hysterectomy or a double mastectomy, because that's where you are. We've had many women come in the clinic at thinking they're at high risk for breast or ovarian cancer, and being diagnosed with something completely different. And that has been more often than not the case. Sometimes that's just sort of what happens when you have someone who thinks they're at high risk for something and sort of feels that in their body. That's what happens. But the baseline thing that we have been always said for over 2 decades now is our goal is for women to know you're normal. And so I think what you felt was your appendix was telling you, your body was telling you, you were not at your normal, and you were completely off, and your body was telling you something is wrong. You are, and it not wrong like you have allergies or you have a cold, like something is really wrong here. And your body is fighting something very, very diligently, and it's not working, and it's not able to fight it itself. It needs something else. Your normal is how you feel normal now. So somehow also in a woman's head, I feel like we think our normal is at sort of like 16 to 18 years old. We're sort of taught, well, our normal was 16 to 18. That was our normal ideal weight and our normal ideal energy level, and how our skin was supposed to look, and, how we were supposed to feel
and stay forever.
And be. And stay for that time. Right. But that was normal for that time. That's not your normal in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And I think it's an ever adjusting normal, and it's really important to recalibrate and really continually get in touch with what is your normal, and the normal needs to continually adjust, but be a healthy normal. And by healthy, I mean know what your body needs to be and needs to do to be that state. So it's going to the bathroom properly, and your skin feels good and looks good, and because you can tell a lot by that, and the texture of your your hair and your nails, all those things are really important. And you don't want to become self-obsessed and staring in the mirror every night, but you also don't want to ignore yourself. And that's something that women also do, really easily. We ignore ourselves.
Well,
And
I
take care of
have a solution
else.
for that.
And
To get away from the staring in the mirror every night, all you have to do is have your boobs cut off and these weird things put on your chest and have your hair fall out from chemo, right? That's all you got to do.
Right. Exactly.
And you won't stare at yourself.
Exactly. We have to be our own best advocate. You have to, obviously, like we said, you have to know you're normal, but you have to be your own best advocate. And we have this sort of, ideal that doctors know everything. And you walk in to a room, and teachers and doctors, they know everything. They went to school for so many years. They're the geniuses in the room, but no one knows your body better than you do. And no one knows no one can sense your insides better than you. And that's a really important thing to remember. And if you don't advocate for yourself, no one else will. Not your husband, not your kids, not your brother, not your best friend. You have to, and you have to voice that. You don't have to be obnoxious about it, but you have to be strong, and you have to be really strong-willed about it, because otherwise, no one's going to look at your right side and no one's going to look at that appendix. You have to ask the questions, and you have to really understand the answers as best you can. And then if you don't understand them, ask them again. Why? And if they don't really have an answer for that why, then don't accept it.
Exactly. So I hope that everything gets back to normal, because I know that you guys did have an event planned.
I know.
And I'm sorry that can't happen.
I know.
But everyone can find you at the link. It's Lynn Cohen Foundation. .org.
And I was going to say, we have kickincancer.com, and so sad, this will be the first year since 2001 that we won't have an actual Kickin' Cancer 5K. This should have been October 4th, but we are figuring out how to do some sort of virtual. It's too amazing of a day and too powerful of an event to just let go completely for this year. So when I figure it out, I will let you know, and let everybody know what we're doing.
That'll be great. I wish you luck with that. I mean, I know you do so many good things, and it's so special to have people like you and your team and everyone in the world that just there, that you're there to do things for other people. And I really, really, really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you. I loved it. Anytime. I'd love to come back. Thank you, Wendy. Have a great day.
Thank you, Amy. And thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been The Wendy Cooper Show, and it is conversations with remarkable people over 50 and sometimes under 50, just like Amy. If you want to check out other episodes, please do so everywhere you download your podcasts. I have changed my artwork, so don't be looking for me in the blue dress. Now I'm in the pink shawl. I just like to be creative and have fun, and I kind of got tired of my other artwork. Had too many words on it. Anyway, also check out Speaking of Age Daily. It is my 5-minute podcast, and they are hysterical. It is a real raw and refreshing perspective on, not so much on age, but just on everything in my life. So I'm having fun doing those, and I hope you will have fun listening to them. So until next time, keep listening, stay safe, and I guess I'm going to thank you again. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Tom Orsi, for everything you do. You're awesome.